Good afternoon. My name is Sunil Kumar, and I have the privilege of serving as the Provost of Johns Hopkins University. On behalf of the university, I'm delighted to welcome Honorable Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs of India, to Johns Hopkins University and to the School of Advanced International Studies. I would also like to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Sandhu and our Chief Economic Advisor, Mr. Ananta Nageshwaran. Minister Sitharaman has had a very distinguished career, both as an innovative educator and a public servant. A student of economics with graduate work at the prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, she has held many important positions in Government of India. In fact, these are not merely important, but path-breaking. In 2014, she was appointed as Minister of State for Commerce and Industry. In 2017, she was appointed as the Defense Minister of India, the first woman to hold that position in India's history. In 2019, she was appointed as the Minister for Finance and Corporate Affairs, another historical first of an appointment of a woman as a full-time finance minister in India. And I think she's the only person in the history of the country to have held both portfolios. So this is an amazing achievement, and we are delighted and indeed fortunate to have her with us today. At Johns Hopkins, we have a growing community of scholars working on issues relating to India and the Indian economy. They're not only here at SAIS, but throughout the university. The newly established Gupta-Klinsky India Initiative, a university-wide initiative that brings together several dozen researchers in the Johns Hopkins community in diverse areas such as medicine, public health, education, arts and humanities, business, economics, public policy, engineering, and data science, and who work in and on India. We are working with a number of Indian partners, both in government and industry, in research, education, policy, and practice, and view our relationship with India as both deep and long-lasting. Welcome, Madam Minister. We look forward to this conversation on technology, finance, and governance, which will be moderated by Professor Praveen Krishna of SAIS. I know you will not only enlighten our students, but inspire them to aspire to become dedicated, impactful leaders like yourself. Thank you again.
Good evening, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. I've come with a prepared speech as well, which I'm sharing with you. I'm sure our people are distributing it, just so that data and detail doesn't bog us down even as we talk. They are necessary, they're absolutely critical to establish the fact that claims that I'm making are well-grounded and proof-worthy. So the speech will have all the details. I'll just flag the issues because the topic is quite unusual and at the same time actually very, very meaningful for India, because good governance in India is being achieved, and I wouldn't say it's already completely achieved, it's being achieved by use of technology, and a certain transformation has happened, which I can say with certain confidence, in the last 2 years. The level of acceptance, the level of adaptation by the people is unbelievable. I'm not making a political statement here, but there were very clearly apprehensions in India, even after 2014 when we started ramping up the capacity for digitalizing the economy. If in India this technology will make any difference at all, will people be ready to use it? We are so used to decades of connectivity being poor, electricity not being available, people not being very so savvy about using gadgets. So there was this apprehension that you may want to do a lot of things to get technology to the people. You may want to invest in bringing in technology to people, but people are not going to be ready to adapt. People may not be comfortable because, one, they may not be so ready to use such gadgets, and the general sense of condescension saying, how will villagers? That kind of. And also, and truly, in India, you get electricity, but with fluctuations. It's not dependable. You don't know at which hour it'll get cut off. So with all this, genuine concerns, because our progress in these areas had been very, very patchy, people thought it's never going to take off. But the fact that between 2014 and 19, the focus which was given for these areas, reach electricity to every village. And once you've reached the village, reach it to every house. And once you've reached the house, convince them that they don't have to pay huge electricity bills. We'll give you bulbs which will consume less electricity per watt. So you had the LED bulb distribution, taking electricity to the households, making them understand how it's going to work, and that there is a fair distribution, and so on. You had everything which technology requires as a prerequisite already reaching villages, giving confidence that systems can work. And then equally you went with optical fibers to the panchayat level. Panchayat is the last elected representative-based village unit. It can have a couple of villages all put together as one panchayat with elected representatives with money given to them, both by the center and the states, knowing what they want to do with that money in that local area. So that is that unit which has publicly elected representatives deciding for themselves as to what to do. So up to that level, optical fibers were taken. You know that India has about 7.5 lakh panchayats, which means more villages. But of the 7.5 lakhs, today nearly 80% of them have received optical fibers to their points. If that has happened, it's also now happening that these optical fibers will not stop at the panchayat, but it will reach the post office in the panchayat area. It will be reaching the common service center, which provides all the public services for them. And in those areas, people are trained to operate, let's say, computers, services, payments, and so on. So with the infrastructure being laid for digital technology to reach everywhere, and people being trained at the local level in the local language, and softwares being provided which can translate everything in the local language, the initial inhibition which people had were all removed. And equally, the government's approach has been, normally when you scale up things, you scale up on the principle of, oh, this works well, so this needs to be scaled up. It has to be replicated. When you scale it up, you can replicate it for other areas as well. Whilst that philosophy is right and it is still adaptable for many activities, we also took this approach that many things will work only when it is scaled up. Like for instance, India has a lot of micro, small, medium industries. Each one has their potential, but they can never be aggregating themselves because they don't know how to do it, and who, after all, is going to carry the burden of having to link up with all of them. Technology came and helped. So you could give the advantage of the MSMEs, that which inherently by the description or definition of MSME, you can't scale them up. But technology helped in scaling them up. In a way, it compares with what in Japan the big corporations did post the Meiji restoration and everything else. I'm sure you're all studying those socio-economic histories of different countries. Large companies did not manufacture everything themselves. They had very many small ancillary units, They wouldn't brand their product. They would be supplied to, let's say, a branded product. I'm just taking the name of Sony. I'm not misusing the name, but I'm quoting it. So what they would do is to have all these small units manufacturing so many different quality products, all of which will go into their, let's say, I don't know, Sony's Walkman and things like that are all gone away. Nowadays, you don't have them. But that's how. Then final product was Sony. Today, you don't need a brand helping you to do that. The open source network that Government of India has created as a public good is helping small and medium industries to do it. In the sense, I would have started off by saying how we could benefit from the scale that 1 billion accounts gave us. Once you reached with banking accounts to all the individuals in India, you had a 1 billion account, so you could see the scale of it and you can do many things. I would have started off by saying that. But it is relevant, and I'll say that very quickly, although I'm going in a different route to talk about how by scaling I'm giving advantage for those who couldn't have been otherwise scaled up. But the scale is what I used first as Government of India. You had 1 billion accounts, you had 1 billion identities, you had 1 billion mobile phones. So you had a fantastic basis for, a ground for scaling up, so you could do the direct benefit transfer to the accounts. You knew their identities, you knew their bank accounts. So you could give all the benefit schemes through technology to them. So that billion is the scale that gives you an advantage. The technology plays in there. But by bringing in the other one, for instance, the open network, digital network for commerce, ONDC, we've come up with a public good where the government has invested money and it's created this huge big platform where small units can get onto that platform, find the buyers, find the sellers for their raw material or selling their products. It is a public good that I've created. I waited for the scale here and created a public good which can help me to transfer or to benefit people. But here, I already have all over the country a small, medium, actually a carpet of MSMEs, but who couldn't be strung together. So a public good in the name of ONDC was created. It's an open network for digital commerce. People can get onto it and trade, buy, sell, and therefore bring that advantage. Similarly, for credit expansion, we've used OCEN, and that helps in credit outreaches. We've also propagated this account aggregator, again using technology, where one set of data available of a particular customer or a client in a bank, with his permission, can be made available for another set of creditors or banks, and therefore this very client who's being serviced by a particular bank but sees that a better terms and condition exists elsewhere can now, without worry, on the net reach this bank, and this bank instantaneously, because the record is available digitally, can help giving credit. The account aggregator is actually getting banks and also credit to reach areas which couldn't have otherwise been so accessible. And when I say this, it's not just in the mainland, sorry to use this expression, I don't know how many students here from Northeast India, pardon me for using this, but in the let's say, northeast part of the country, you can always reach one place or the other. Just try doing it in Nagaland. Just try doing it in Mizoram. It takes, for a distance of about 200 kilometers, it takes more than 16 hours to reach. Not because there are no roads, roads are there, but because it winds and winds and winds through the hillocks, and reaching there takes that kind of time. No bank would want to physically be present. But today they get their services of banking because purely these kind of networks are available. So if network has helped us, digital networking has helped us in all these areas, equally it has helped us in making sure that tax collection is happening. Today, everything that India collects is through the digital networking. There are no inspectors visiting your office to say you have to pay up this much as per this rate. Pay. No. You can make your claim, you pay your assessments, you actually fight with the income tax department saying you've taken too much from me, you better refund. All that happens on the digital platforms. Appeals are on digital. Settlements are on digital. So if that is on income tax, direct tax that is, indirect tax, everything happens on the digital platforms. You service a customer, you give him a bill, your GSTN number is in the bill, you know how much of tax you've collected, it automatically goes to the pool. And then gets redistributed to the states, which are, the provinces in the large country. So what gets collected is digitally serviced into the pool, and from the pool it goes to the states again digitally. So if India today can talk of a digital stack, it's not talking of just the payment where UPI, which is today acceptable in Singapore, UAE, and many other countries. We are not talking of just RuPay cards, we are not talking of credit cards, we are not talking of checkbook, we are talking of QR codes, which an Android phone, not a smartphone, no Apples, even anything else, can just go do the business using a QR code, not just in India, but in countries with whom we've already agreed. The National Payment Corporation of India has already had agreements signed in France. So the apps that are under this larger umbrella of NPCI are all available there, Beam, any other payment portal, and these are not charged. These are public goods that we have created. And standing here, I want to reiterate that India's public goods are available for countries which so they need it. For instance, during the COVID pandemic, we had created this app called CoWIN. You could register in CoWIN and find that nearest hospital which can give you the vaccination first dose. And that platform would record it and immediately give you a certificate in the phone itself saying you've had this first dose in this first hospital, and that dose is whatever, AstraZeneca or Covaxin. And for the next dose, it'll remind you after 6 months, 9 months, or whatever the period is. And you would still be going, by that time, if you weren't in that same place, it'll still tell you where to go in the place that you're living in after the move. And so with the third dose, the booster. And that could always be checked up because the trail was complete. And as a result, Indians traveling abroad didn't have to carry paper to prove, look, I've had my vaccination. They could show it on the phone. Now that CoWIN app, therefore, is now available for any country which wants to use it. Now, this is the way in which technology is transforming education. And I'm glad to say technology is something which helped Indian rural students to not miss out on education even during lockdown. We were able to reach out with some kind of a phone or a mobile app through which education was being imparted. May not be the ideal situation, but they didn't lose out on education completely. Today, I remember the last budget, 21 budget if I remember correct. 200 channels have been dedicated through the government's public television channel for schools to have by-class education in their mother tongue. And India obviously has more than 15 official recognized languages. So children can learn from watching the television in their house, and it's not a fancy charge-paid channel. It is Doordarshan, which is again a public good. You don't pay fees for it. So 200 channels have been dedicated so that education can be taken digitally to schools. Other than that, in the near future, You will have digital banking units. You will have digital university. The best of university in India will now be digitally available for students wherever they are. So university doesn't have to go set up a campus there, but you will be affiliated to that university and get your education digitally from wherever you are. Digital banking units, digital universities. Digital healthcare is anyway already on board, and we are improving it every time. Telemedicine is now very successful in India. So digital transformation, governance are all very much dependent on awareness building. We've spent a lot on creating awareness so that people are ready to accept technology. I'll end by recalling a little anecdote which will tell you why in India, in the last 2 years, the digitalization has become a biggest advantage, and people are the reason for it, the way in which they have adapted it. I can see many of you Indian students here, but I don't know if what I'm going to tell you is available in every state. There are, at least in states in the south, a practice once in a year, which has been an age-old practice, and it is normally during the month of January when we have a celebration in the name of Shankaranti. Shankaranti is when the actual sun's movement happens towards the northern hemisphere. At that time, some states call it Pongal, some states call it Shankaranti. You have village bulls, literally, which are tended by the local people, dressed up, and they would move from one house to another. And the man who maintains it also knows to play what is a wind instrument called, sophisticated version is called Shehnai, or in the south it's called Nadaswaram. But somewhere in between the two, there is one wind instrument, which this man will play and go around from one house to another. And he would have a bag hung on the shoulder of the bull, into which you will give handful of rice, or if anything, more rice. And also all your old used clothes will be given, and that will be put on the bull back. You know, you'll go and put it. It could be a bed sheet, it could be a sari, it could be a dhoti, but you'll put it. And he'll immediately, carefully also put it on the bull, and he'll move from house to house. But together with the rice and with the bed sheet or a sari, you will give him some cash. And that cash he would humbly receive and put it into his purse, or sometimes on the horn of the bull, there would be a small pouch-like thing into which you will put the money, and he'll do some kind of a music in front of your house as a thanksgiving and move to the next. Every Shankranti. This Shankranti, I had somebody send me a WhatsApp saying, you should know this. This is what has happened in our village. And I saw what it is. All this music playing and standing, and, you know, the mother comes with a handful of rice and puts it, all that happened. But when this lady was also to give the cash, this man said, "Heh?" And even as he's going about playing the music, he showed the forehead of the bull, like that, and it had a QR code. So actually, this mother said, oh, even she was not surprised. She said, oh, okay, and called her son from inside, saying, Babu, in Andhra, little boys of any age are called Babu. So Babu, ajao. And the fellow came and saw what's mother up to. Oh, he said this. All right, he came with his phone and it's all over. This guy moved to the next. Adaptation to technology. So with that, I end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thanks for coming to Johns Hopkins. It's a great honor and pleasure for all of us. So the format for the evening is as follows. We'll begin the conversation with Minister Sitharaman with a couple of questions that I'll put to her. We'll open this up to for a broader question and answer from the floor, session from the floor, which will go on until about 5:15 or 5:20, after which we adjourn, and the minister will have an informal meeting with the students of Johns Hopkins in the adjoining room in the Herter room that goes on until about 5:45. So let me first say, Minister, thank you very much. From the dark days of COVID, India has emerged as one of the fastest growing countries in the world. Just today, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva called India the bright spot in an otherwise dark horizon. You must have faced very many difficult economic kind of management decisions. Could you elaborate a bit on how this success was actually achieved in terms of India emerging in such a robust fashion out of COVID? And to the theme of your presentation today, you talked quite a bit about technology and governance. Did this play any particular role in kind of enabling India to come out of COVID in the way that it has as a strong economy with a kind of a very fast growth trajectory that's predicted for it?
I think it played a more than disproportionate role, because well before 2014, India started digitizing itself, giving Aadhaar identity to people, opening bank accounts, and so on. But the success wasn't anything noteworthy. It moved like many other schemes of the government. But from 2014 onwards, making sure that everybody who needs to get an Aadhaar should get it. Everybody who needs to have a bank account should have it. So the push that was given between 14 and 19 actually has helped us, and helped us in very many unbelievable ways. We were able to provide relief immediately during the lockdown, even as all of us could remain in Delhi and press a button, the money used to go to the account. Similarly, because by that time, the public distribution system, the card that is given to the family as an identity, have also been digitized. You knew how many people actually were to take it. And during that time, let me add this, a very important reform measure was also adopted during the COVID lockdown. We didn't think that's a bad time to do it. We thought this is the best opportunity, we should do it. We brought in this thing about one nation, one ration card, which is nothing but you have a ration card, your family is in the village with you, but you found a job and you're going elsewhere. Now there, instead of you having to be cut out from the ration that is provided to you, you could draw your little quantity that you want, and whatever is left out, the family can draw it in the village. So the card became mobile in the sense that it could be used by the family members irrespective of where they lived, and therefore this entire country, as opposed to the earlier system of if you're in your district, if you're in your village, you could use it in that particular shop where you're accredited to, otherwise you won't get your free food grain, meaning rationed, the discounted food grain. So that reform step was also simultaneously taken during the lockdown. So having an identity, having a bank card, having a mobile which is registered with the government, you are able to communicate with all of them so very quickly. And equally at that time, because we were able to constantly understand, hear from the, let's say, manufacturing units, small units, big units, about the nature of problem they were undergoing, we were able to give targeted relief, targeted assistance, targeted credit assistance, and so on. So we believed that the targeted approach was possible because we were technologically already well networked. And because we were technologically well networked and we had authenticated identities of people already well established, we were able to do the targeted relief provision. And that helped us in that we reached out to sections which needed and did not splurge money on sections which didn't need it. As a result, fiscal prudence together with real-time assistance for those who need it was made possible.
Thank you. This is slightly off the theme of your comments earlier, but I can't resist asking you this. So we're in the middle of very extraordinary economic and geopolitical circumstances, macroeconomic uncertainties, wars, shortages of energy, oil, fertilizer, and so forth. How do you assess this? I mean, what are the greatest threats from this for the India growth story? Are there aspects of the Indian economy, including the provision of digital public goods and so forth in the last few years, that make you somewhat more confident that India will be resilient against these particular shocks?
Slightly answering this question, but slightly from a different route. There were times when global benchmarks, global standards, were the ones which India had to look up to and say, we'll have to catch up to that level. We'll have to learn from that and do it. There are still a lot of areas where we still have to learn a lot of things and do according to benchmarks set elsewhere. But on the digital thing, be it payment, be it identity, be it health, be it education, be it also the way in which your compliance requirements are all being taken care of. India has actually set benchmarks. And there are countries which recognize that this scale of achievement, this absolute watertight proof that it is unfailing over the years, over the numbers and the size of the expanse that it is dealing. We actually have set global benchmarks in the way in which digital economy and the services that digital platforms can do for us. And that itself, for India, is a very big confidence booster. Our economy's doing well business is largely because the confidence in what has happened in the last 2 years, palpably felt by people who so deserve it, are standing out. And that is why I would think that the economy's revival is on a sustained path. Because of the global recession, if my demand is going to fall externally and my exports are going to suffer, and because of a strong dollar, my Indian rupee would suffer, all this taken on board, there's a sense of confidence in India that we will go through this and we'll be able to still perform. It's because of the way in which technology has been used for the public good. People are able to see that there are constantly approaches made for getting better credit, easy credit, to sustain business, small, big, medium. Normal gripe would be big businesses somehow find their resources, but the small ones are the ones who don't get any assistance. Today, the small ones have not just getting assistance, but sitting at home, they can access through the digital. These are actually great lubricants when the economy is wanting to find ways in which they can come out of the lockdown or come out of the difficulties of a largely extraneous problem, which is because of prices going up, commodity prices going up, inflation which is coming because of large amount of currencies held here or there, money's coming in, FDI, money's going out, FPI. Despite all that, these are the building blocks of India's confidence, I would say.
Thank you very much. Let me open this up to the floor. Please wait for a mic to come to you. We have Professor Prabhala here with a raised hand. If you could just introduce yourselves and keep your questions brief, then we'll, let's start with Professor here.
Professor Prabha from Carey Business School. I had one question which is concerned about the use of digital infrastructure. The way it's been used is very impressive, but is there any concern about the potential abuses and the privacy of individuals and the right to privacy, the right to be forgotten by the system and so on?
Well, yes, on the right to privacy, there are various different stakeholder consultations which have been held. Parliamentary Standing Committee has gone into it. There was a bill which was introduced into the House, which later has been withdrawn because we want to come up with a newer bill. The minister concerned has said sooner he will bring that bill, which will address issues of privacy. In the meanwhile, I think every platform which has been created is constantly reminded about the do's and don'ts. So the public platforms which government has created has definitely been conscious of this. Banks have constantly been reminded, even in the account aggregator that we brought in, banks consciously, repeatedly tell customers that without explicit permission, no data will be shared with anybody. So there is this awareness that legislative backing is what has got to be brought in now, which will happen soon.
Since time is short, maybe we'll just collect a couple of questions and then Minister, if that's okay. Lady here.
So I'm Shivali. My question, I think, is on the multiplier effect that we talk about, and I think it would be important to just understand how technology interacts with financial institutions in India to empower women, especially women-owned small and medium enterprises, and how we talk about data privacy, but talking about data creation, we know that there's a gap in collecting gender disaggregated data when it comes to women SMEs, and that may be a challenge for just understanding how supply-side access for women to these financial institutions becomes a hindrance for women to be encouraged to become entrepreneurs in their own country. So, thank you.
Thank you. Question here.
Good evening, ma'am. Ameya Joshi, first-year student at SAIS from the MEIR program. My question was, you very astutely expounded on the government's approach when it comes to technology and the various measures that have come out. Could you please share a bit on the recent the projects that the Ministry of Finance is taking with respect to emerging technologies, especially with quantum computing and 5G, and if you could just share something on that, that would be great. Thank you.
We'll maybe take one other question from this side, from the lady here. Yes, go ahead.
I feel so lucky. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. My name is Alice Zhang. I'm a doctorate student at SAIS, and it's fascinating to learn the technology stacks that India is developing. As we all know, that India also has the largest population for labor force, and so my question is, with that large population, there are pros and cons, and so what do you see, or what the Indian government is taking actions in preparing this labor force for the technology development instead of being replaced by it? Thank you.
So there was the one question, second and the third. Were there only three, or did I miss out on anyone else? I've answered the professor, I think.
You answered the professor. You'll have another longer opportunity to engage with the students separately. But
at
for
the
now,
moment,
just
there were three
at the
questions,
moment, there were
right?
three, yes.
See, you're right in saying, do we collect data on women-run businesses? Do we have data on women who require credit? Women, they are happening in different ways by different independent sources rather than, I would think, the government. But because of the way in which schemes have been developed, women are getting covered. For instance, there is a scheme called Mudra, which is a small loan being given for small businesses in which you don't need to bring in any collateral, you don't need a guarantor. You could come and take the loan and service it. And it is also, the interest rate is also concessional and so on. 45% of all loans given have gone to women businessmen. One, Jan Dhan Yojana, where you open the accounts, but through the accounts, many other facilities are also available. Now we find women account holders have received benefits and also are accessed by banks to give them targeted programs. Third, when we supported the startup schemes, the fear was that it's going to be a very urban-driven process. All startups are in cities, metropolitans. We said, no, we need bank branches of every bank in every area that they would be in the villages, even if there was just one branch of a particular bank. It would do the same as was being done for startups to local innovative entrepreneurs. And from among them, one should compulsorily be a woman, one should compulsorily be a scheduled caste, one should be a compulsorily from a scheduled tribe. So that has been mandated to the banks. So women entrepreneurs, innovative ones, get their loans there and then in the area in which they live. So the stand-up is actually trying to promote women entrepreneurs, innovative ones in particular, who can go in for patenting their innovation and so on. So through that, businesses are developed. And similarly for skilling, a lot of activities are being taken up in which women-friendly activities, not just tailoring, papad making or anything, even going into the shop floor and doing things. And finally, in villages, with budget provision being made, we have said women should be recognized as farmers who actually do farming activity. And farming is no longer just working on the fields. It could be that you own a bovine animal and therefore you produce milk, or you have sheep or goats, or you're running piggery, or you have a family which lives on fishing from the sea or from the freshwater. All of them have been categorized as Kisan and therefore get concessional assistance from the banks. And recognizing women as part of farmers is also part of this. And why do I have to say this? Farmers now can form small FPOs, which are farmer producer organization. Now, when you form a cooperative, you don't earn profits. Whereas when you form a FPO, for which government says, all right, you formed an FPO, in your village, you should now procure the grains which are produced in your village and keep it in a silo, for which we'll give you money to build the storage. And when prices are favorable, you sell it. So FPOs in villages, in which women and self-help groups run by women all benefit from the schemes given to them, and the government funds them, gives them core capital or viability gap funding, through which they build capacities to store grains, aggregate grains, and find market later. So there are a few more, but I'm just highlighting the prominent ones. So that was a question on 5G, and 2 budgets ago, if I'm right, had given a big funding for quantum computing. I've still not gone back to them to find out how best they have utilized it or what are they doing it. But it was given. Similarly, 5G. The story is yet to reach the public, but the 5G that we've launched in our country is completely indigenous, standalone. There could be some critical parts coming from, say, countries like Korea, but certainly not coming from somebody else. So completely indigenous technology that we can now provide 5G for countries which they want, whoever wants it. So our 5G is not imported from somewhere else. It's our own, product. And the spread of it is also rapid. You've had private companies which have, made these 5G products themselves. I've very clearly said, by this year end, a certain amount of primary locations. By 24 end, most of the country will be covered. So on 5G, I think we can be immensely proud of India's achievement. Ma'am, medical doctor. Oh. No, say that again. You said not a real one, a fake one? Why?
And I just study. So I just do research.
Okay.
And so my question was actually regarding the technology development and how will the Indian government prepare the labor force to not be replaced by technology.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, see, the skilling and upskilling is a big area in which India is doing quite a lot of things. During the pandemic, the typical media highlighting some things. I don't blame them. They obviously have to show human stories. You saw migrant workers walking back thousands of kilometers, not having trains because lockdown. Whilst that is a picture which remains in our mind, it's equally true a lot of them went back through trains, buses, and so on, but it just shows the size of migrant laborers in India. Now, after they went back to their respective villages, government also funded a lot of schemes through which they can temporarily be employed in some form or the other. There is a government rural employment guarantee scheme which is provided to people who want jobs in the rural areas for at least a minimum of 100 days in a year. So these are schemes through which during the lockdown we tried helping people who have gone back. But one noteworthy development which I repeat wherever I talk is many of these people who went back to their villages, once the lockdown was lifted and once work was coming back to normalcy, didn't go back to their original employers. They realized that they had skills which their other village people didn't have. Either they chose to be there or choose better jobs which paid better. So skill and the value of skill has suddenly woken up a lot of people in India who were just migrating to very many places and doing odd jobs. Today they realize doing the odd job, but with a little bit of skill in their hand, they have a bargaining power in terms of where they work, how much they work for, and so on. So the Labor Ministry, interestingly, created a website. This was only to purely document migrant workers who were going out and coming into a district. So they created a website which eventually will be manned in the respective districts, but the website was to say who exactly is this migrant laborer, what skills he had, and what are the kind of jobs he had done, so that in case we want to further train him, upskill him, or if he had no skills at all, give him the first skilling, this website would come of help. They had roughly said about 28 different jobs which they thought the migrant workers were doing. It turns out, subject to correction, more than 200 types of jobs were listed out by themselves, the workers themselves, showing that there are area specializations which each one says, I am doing this. Now, if this chap has to find a better job, the training will have to be for that particular area. So the levels to which migrant laborers have specialized themselves, found a niche for themselves, came out when the website was being created. I don't know the final number of trades which have got included in it. So now every state has started recognizing the kind of trades for which these people inherently had the talent or acquired the talent. Skilling is happening on that, and also on updating, most of which also relate to modern using of machines, using of technology tools, and using of digitized work flows. So they have to be adept at using computers and so on. So actually in India, it's not replacing labor. It's actually giving them newer areas of going into work for which there is enough and more. In fact, you would probably ask me, is the government able to train all these people with all these, various types? Industries have come together, not just the big ones. There are small and medium industry clusters in India. These clusters have formed their own associations. I can give you clear, distinctive examples, case studies, where they take 10th class pass students, train them in the kind of jobs that they would want to recruit, and if the cluster would need 100 people, they train 500 people. So they absorb 100 of them, and the rest 400 are available in the market. And I've heard from at least 2 of these associations that not one is left without a job after the training. 100 in their own area, 400 go to different parts of the country, they get the jobs. Now, much more than government's own training, these are very job-driven. These are very industry-driven. These are very immediately absorb, and the fellow is giving contribution from tomorrow. Whereas if government is training, you would genuinely train, no doubt. But to find that particular industry which can absorb him would become a bit of a problem. Whereas when industry do it, they'll absorb 100. They'll also say, one cluster there would need you, you can go there. And that way, he doesn't take time to get absorbed into the job. I've heard many engineering students, I don't know, many of you all are engineers here, surely. Engineering students, when they are absorbed through campus recruitments, are trained for 6 months extra by the company which recruits you, because you can't straight contribute to it. And that 6 months is an investment that company is making in you for training. So like that, if the clusters themselves train, they train to such an extent that you can immediately get absorbed and start contributing. So skilling in India is a success because of many of these clusters now being ready to take on local students and train them.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Long wound answers.
No, thank you very much. I did see many more hands raised earlier, but time is short and Minister's on a tight schedule. So we'll stop with this proceeding here for now. Students, I think many of you have already registered for this informal meet with the Minister. Please proceed to the room next door, the Herder room, and Minister will join you there in just a few minutes for a brief introduction. Thank you very much, Minister, for coming. Joining us.